Welcome to the deep dive. Pull up a chair because we're plunging into the dense, electric, and ultimately heartbreaking final sections of Fyodor Dostoevsky's monumental novel, The Brothers Karamazov.
Mm,
We've got the source material right here, a stack of notes and insights that guide us through the climactic trial,
mm.
the immediate chaotic aftermath, and even reveal, well, a pretty surprising path Dostoevsky intended to take his characters down, but never actually did.
That's right. We're past the long, complex buildup now and landing squarely in those moments where fates are decided, truths, and maybe falsehoods are laid bare. And the deep human core of these characters is truly tested.
Yeah.
So our mission today, really, armed with only the material provided, is to unpack the sheer intensity of this conclusion, explore the unexpected turns, and grapple with the profound questions Dostoevsky leaves swirling, long after the final page.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our source material picks up with the trial of Dmitry Karamazov, already underway. The courtroom is set, the tension is high, and the lawyers are about to deliver their closing arguments, each hoping to sway the jury and, in a way, the soul of Russia itself, if you listen to their rhetoric.
It truly is a battle fought with words. And the source material highlights two very different strategies employed by the prosecution and the defense. It's a masterclass in how narrative and emotional appeal can be just as crucial as factual evidence in shaping perception
Definitely.
and influencing a verdict.
Absolutely. Let's start with the prosecution's lawyer. The source describes his approach as highly emotional, even provocative. He's not just presenting evidence. He's actively trying to ignite the jury's passions and, well, maybe their prejudices too.
Precisely. His aim is unambiguous: to paint Dmitri as a dangerous, morally corrupt individual who is unequivocally guilty of patricide and deserves the harshest possible punishment.
Right.
And the source details several specific arguments he uses to achieve this.
First and foremost, the direct accusation. Dmitry killed his father, Fyodor. No hedging, no doubt presented whatsoever. Bang.
And then he escalates the charge, arguing that Dmitri attempted not just one, but two murders that night. He recounts the incident where Dmitri struck Grigory with the pestle, and the source notes how the prosecution frames Dmitri's actions after striking Grigory, him jumping back over the wall and checking on Grigory, not as a sign of any possible concern, but as a cold, calculated move.
To make sure he was dead.
Exactly, to ensure he had eliminated a potential witness. He was, in the prosecution's view, in the very act of attempted double murder. It was only by chance that Grigory survived.
That's a chilling interpretation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Twisting a moment of possible hesitation or just, checking into further evidence of malice. The source even mentioned that Dmitri's first question upon being apprehended was about Grigory's condition,
Which they weaponized.
which the prosecution weaponizes, implying he was checking if his witness was still alive. Sneaky.
It's a powerful piece of rhetoric designed to remove any shred of sympathy for Dmitri. And the prosecution also ties this recent violence to Dmitri's earlier actions, reminding the jury of his physical assault on Fyodor just 2 days prior.
Right, establishing a pattern.
Yeah, this is presented as evidence of a pattern, a deep-seated animosity and intent to harm his father that finally culminated in murder.
And of course, Katerina Ivanovna's testimony is heavily relied upon. The source emphasizes how damning her words were perceived to be by the prosecution, along with that crucial letter she possessed.
Yes, the source points out that Katerina's statements and that letter provided what the prosecution needed to solidify their narrative, presenting seemingly irrefutable evidence of Dmitri's violent threats and intentions towards his father.
It seemed pretty damning at the time.
It did, but the culmination of the prosecution's case, according to the source, is perhaps its most striking element, the closing argument that elevates the case from a simple murder trial to something of, well, national significance.
Oh yeah, the Save Russia plea.
Absolutely. The prosecution lawyer argues that acquitting Dmitri wouldn't just be a miscarriage of justice for the victim, but a threat to the entire nation. He claims that if Dmitri, this seemingly dissolute character, is allowed to go free after such a crime, it would send a dangerous message.
Like people would copy him.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
Others would be inspired by his actions, leading to moral decay and lawlessness across Russia.
For the sake of Russia, the prosecution insists, he must be punished. It's a direct, emotionally charged appeal to the jury's sense of patriotism and civic duty. Framed in stark terms, the safety and moral fabric of the nation depend on their verdict. The source material makes it clear that this kind of fervent, almost nationalistic appeal could be incredibly impactful on a jury of ordinary citizens.
It bypasses purely legal arguments and taps into deeper fears and sentiments. You can imagine the weight of that resting on the jurors. It's heavy stuff.
Definitely. Now let's turn to the defense. The source material contrasts their approach quite sharply with the prosecution's. It's described as more logical, straightforward, less overtly emotional.
Yes, the defense lawyer attempts to cut through the emotional fog created by the prosecution by focusing on reason, a lack of concrete evidence, and alternative explanations.
He immediately challenges the prosecution's narrative, dismissing it as nothing more than fake stories, invented and fabricated on the spot.
Yeah, basically calling it fiction.
He argues they are building a case on creative writing, not facts.
His central counterargument, and a powerful one according to the source, is the complete absence of eyewitnesses. He stresses repeatedly that no one saw Dmitry commit the key actions he's accused of.
That's a big point.
It is. No one saw him steal the infamous 3,000 rubles, not Ivan, not Katerina, not Grigory. It's all based on circumstantial talk and assertions about motive.
And crucially, he emphasizes that no one saw Dmitry strike or kill his father directly. Grigory only encountered Dmitry after the alleged crime had occurred.
Right. So, with the lack of direct evidence against Dmitry, the defense shifts the blame squarely onto another character who was present that night.
He explicitly names Smerdyakov as the true killer.
And the source material details the motive the defense lawyer attributes to Smerdyakov, which is presented as being born not out of financial gain or even direct filial rage in the way Dmitry might have it, but out of a profound internal despair and hatred.
This is where the source dives into Smerdyakov's painful origins. Fyodor's illegitimate son with a mentally challenged beggar, Lizaveta. Such a tragic backstory.
It really is. The defense paints a picture of a man treated cruelly from birth, receiving no love, viewed as a burden, an outcast. This neglect and societal rejection, according to the source, festered into a deep, consuming hatred, not just for Fyodor, who abandoned him, but for himself and for the world that created him. The source quotes the defense, emphasizing it was an act of pure hatred, born of his miserable existence and treatment, devoid of any conventional guilt. His crime, in this framing, was almost an existential act of vengeance against a world that had wronged him from his very first breath.
That's a really different angle. It leads the defense lawyer to make a powerful philosophical point, challenging the very definition of father.
It's a core argument of the defense's strategy. He contends that a man isn't automatically a father simply by biologically begetting a child. True fatherhood, he argues, is a title that must be earned through love, care, and presence.
And he uses Fyodor's character as the prime example of someone who utterly failed to earn that title.
Exactly. The source material recounts the defense highlighting Fyodor's neglectful history, his indifference to his wives, his partying while they died, his ignorance of where one wife was even buried, and his failure to recognize his grown sons when they first returned. Just awful stuff.
Yeah, really paints a picture.
He points out how Fyodor threw Dmitry away, leaving him to be raised by a servant, providing nothing in terms of guidance, affection, or financial support. The source captures the defense, contrasting this with Dmitry's simple gratitude for small things, like receiving almonds from a doctor, precisely because his father gave him nothing of substance.
Just basic kindness meant so much.
Right. Fyodor, in this view, was a father in name only. This argument serves to portray Fyodor not as a sympathetic victim, but as a character whose own failings contributed to the tragedy, potentially mitigating any action taken against him in the jury's eyes.
Makes sense. The defense lawyer even goes a step further, for the sake of argument, conceding the possibility that Dmitry might have struck Fyodor.
Yes, he entertains this possibility, but is careful to argue that, even if it happened, it was absolutely not premeditated or planned murder.
Okay.
He suggests that Dmitry went to the house that night seeking what he believed was his rightful inheritance money, the 3,000 rubles from his mother's legacy.
Right. The money Dmitry felt he was owed.
Exactly. And if violence occurred, it wasn't intentional killing, but a moment of temporary insanity or a fit of rage, perhaps triggered by seeing Fyodor's hateful face or engaging in a heated argument over the money.
So, like a crime of passion, not calculation.
That's the idea. The defense posits that in such a moment of extreme passion, Dmitry might have simply picked up whatever object was closest, maybe the pestle, and swung it, with it hitting Fyodor's head purely by chance.
Okay.
The source emphasizes that the defense lawyer stresses this was not a planned murder, but a spontaneous, unplanned act born of temporary madness and provocation.
So even in the hypothetical scenario where Dmitry did strike the blow, it was presented as a result of Fyodor's provocation and Dmitry's temporary loss of control, not cold-blooded intent.
Exactly. And the defense concludes their case with their own powerful appeal to the jury, mirroring the prosecution's use of national sentiment but inverting the message.
How so?
They argue that true justice and the real safety of Russia lies in acquitting Dmitry because he is innocent of planned murder.
Ah, so they flip the Save Russia argument back on the prosecution.
Precisely. The defense's message is essentially, Russia will be saved when Dmitry is saved, suggesting that punishing an innocent or at least less culpable man would be the true mistake or problem for the country.
That's clever. It's a clever rhetorical move, attempting to harness the same patriotic fervor the prosecution stirred up, but directing it towards an acquittal.
It really shows the skill of both lawyers, doesn't it? In trying to frame the case in terms that resonated beyond the simple facts of who struck the fatal blow, the source material gives us a vivid picture of this courtroom drama, this clash of opposing narratives and emotional strategies.
The source also adds a little anecdotal touch that reveals something about the public perception of Dmitry's character. Apparently, the defense lawyer mentions the prosecution lawyer's wife,
Oh, yeah, that bit.
who is fond of Dmitry and would have been furious with her own husband for presenting what the defense views as false stories if she had been in court.
It's a small but telling detail, isn't it? It injects a moment of almost unexpected humor and highlights that outside the courtroom's formal proceedings, personal feelings and perceptions about Dmitry were varied and strong.
Yeah, it reinforces that Dmitry, despite his flaws, had a certain charm or appeal, particularly noted among women earlier in the source material.
Yeah, and it subtly undermines the prosecution's image by suggesting even his own wife might see through the fabricated aspects of his case. It adds another layer to the human drama surrounding the trial.
So, after these passionate and contrasting presentations, the court breaks for the jury's deliberation. The source indicates this break was roughly an hour.
Just an hour for 12 ordinary citizens to weigh the emotional appeals, the lack of direct evidence, the character assassinations, the alternative theories, everything, and decide the fate of Dmitry Karamazov.
It must have been intense in that jury room.
You'd think so. The source material makes the outcome clear. When the jury returns, their decision is pronounced.
Dmitry is found guilty of the murder.
Dmitry is the criminal. He committed the murder. The source uses stark language to convey the finality of the verdict. No ambiguity.
And the sentence is severe. He is sentenced to be sent to Siberia.
Yeah. A sentence that typically meant years of hard labor, often in the brutal conditions of Siberian mines, a life of exile and hardship. Basically, a living death for many.
The reaction in the courtroom, as described in the source, is a powerful illustration of the divided feelings about Dmitry and the social dynamics at play.
Yes, the source notes a sharp contrast. The men present are described as being happy, even pleased by the verdict.
Rivals got what they wanted.
Seems like it. Dmitry, being a flamboyant and often disruptive figure, was seen as a rival by many of the local men.
While the women, in stark contrast, are crying, screaming, and deeply distressed by the sentencing. The women are very troubled, the source notes, highlighting the emotional response from those who perhaps saw beyond the accusations to Dmitry's more sympathetic qualities.
It underscores the complex perception of Dmitry in the community, viewed as a threat or rival by men, but often eliciting sympathy and affection from women.
Yeah. His fate is sealed. He is taken to prison immediately to await his transport to Siberia.
But the story isn't over with the verdict, not by a long shot. The source material quickly shifts scene and focus. We find Ivan Karamazov, Dmitry's intellectual brother, suffering from a brain fever at Katerina Ivanovna's house.
Right, Ivan's completely broken down.
His intense philosophical struggles, his internal conflict over his beliefs, his guilt, and his potential indirect involvement in his father's death have clearly taken a severe toll, manifesting as a physical and mental collapse.
And it's here, amidst Ivan's illness, that Katerina reveals a surprising new determination to Alexei.
Yeah, this is a big turn. Despite her damaging testimony at the trial, she declares to Alexei that she must speak with Dmitry, and more importantly, she is determined to free him. I must get Dmitry out, the source notes her resolve.
This, naturally, surprises Alexei. I mean, how could she testify against him and now want to orchestrate his escape? It seems contradictory.
The source highlights Alexei's questioning reaction, prompting Katerina to reveal the deeper, more complex motivations behind her actions. It wasn't simple malice against Dmitry.
And this leads to a major revelation from Katerina. Her testimony against Dmitry was driven by a desperate desire to save Ivan.
Bingo.
The source presents this as her first explicit confession to Alexei of her true feelings. She loves Ivan.
Yes, her loyalty and love for Ivan superseded everything else in that moment in court. But she clarifies that her feelings for Dmitri are not gone. He is still an old love for her.
Oh, okay.
The source indicates that for the sake of this past, enduring affection, she feels a moral imperative to save him from the brutal reality of Siberian exile.
Her plan is quite specific.
Yeah.
They will not allow him to be sent to Siberia. They will arrange an escape route.
And the destination they settle upon? America. A classic escape destination.
Meanwhile, Dmitri isn't immediately convinced that escaping is the right course of action. He has his principles.
Yeah. The source notes his initial hesitation. He felt that escaping would effectively admit guilt, making him a fugitive, or banoka, as the source notes in the original context.
Yeah.
He believes he's innocent, and that running away would contradict that belief,
It would look bad.
confirming the accusations against him in the eyes of the world.
But Alexei visits Dmitri in prison and, according to the source, manages to persuade him with a very pragmatic, human argument that cuts through Dmitri's idealistic stance.
Alexei focuses on the woman Dmitri loves, Grushenka. He argues that if Dmitri goes to Siberia, sentenced to hard labor, perhaps specifically describing the harsh conditions of the mines, working alone underground,
Total isolation.
he will be completely separated from Grushenka. How will you live there without Grushenka? Alexei presses. That's the key.
This strikes home. The thought of a life, however just he might feel his cause is, without the woman he loves, is unbearable. This immediate, tangible loss overrides his abstract principle against being a fugitive.
It brings the reality of his sentence into sharp focus in a way that the legal injustice hadn't. So Dmitri agrees to the escape plan, but he has significant conditions.
His primary condition is his refusal to leave Russia permanently. "I will not leave Russia," he insists, declaring, "Russia is my spirit."
That's a powerful statement of national identity and deep connection to his homeland, isn't it? Even when it has condemned him. He cannot envision a life lived entirely outside of it.
So the escape plan they devise is elaborate, taking this condition into account. They will go to America, but only temporarily, and crucially, they will go with Grushenka.
That's non-negotiable for him. The source details their specific vision for America. Learning English, living outside of cities, which they dislike, perhaps engaging in farming or agriculture, even considering living with tribal people, seeking a simpler, more natural existence away from urban corruption and judgment.
A kind of back-to-the-land dream, but in exile.
Sort of. And after living the secluded life for 8 to 10 years, they plan to change their appearance completely and return to live elsewhere in Russia, presumably under new identities, able to be on their home soil once more.
Wow, that's quite a long-term plan.
Hmm.
Risky, too.
It's a plan born of both necessity and a yearning for a different kind of life, blending the need for anonymity with a desire to return to their spiritual homeland.
While this escape plan is taking shape, Katerina goes to visit Dmitri in prison.
This scene is described in the source as incredibly poignant, a moment of deep emotional resolution between the two. Dmitri is described as holding her hands. They sit together, allowing for a final, honest conversation.
In this meeting, they make mutual confessions, both saying, "I love you."
But the source makes it clear that both understand this is an expression of past love. Katerina acknowledges that she loves Ivan now, and Dmitri confirms his love for Grushenka now. This is past love for both of us, the source notes, capturing the bittersweet nature of the moment.
It's not about rekindling their past romance, then, but acknowledging the truth of what they once felt and perhaps what lingers in memory.
Exactly. And out of this acknowledgement comes mutual forgiveness.
Which they both needed, I think.
Definitely. They forgive each other for their past, hurts Katerina for her seemingly damning testimony, Dmitri for breaking their engagement for Grushenka. The source emphasizes they recognize that each had their complex reasons for their actions and that formal apologies are unnecessary.
Just understanding is enough.
Apparently. Their shared understanding of their tangled history is enough to clear away the hard feelings. They cleared their hearts, the source says, indicating a sense of peace and closure.
So a moment of profound emotional release where the tangled threads of their past relationship are finally straightened out.
And just as Katerina is leaving the prison, a dramatic timing, Grushenka arrives.
Oh boy. The two women who have been rivals for Dmitri's affection throughout the novel, meeting face-to-face in this charged setting. Awkward.
You can imagine. The source describes a brief, tense interaction as they pass each other. They simply look at one another, a silent acknowledgement of their complicated connection through Dmitri.
Katerina offers a plea to Grushenka, if possible, forgive me.
Grushenka's response, as detailed in the source, is not an immediate or direct forgiveness. Instead, she offers Katerina a condition for future forgiveness.
Okay, what's the condition?
She tells Katerina that if Katerina helps Dmitri escape from prison and successfully carries out the planned escape to America, then Grushenka will consider herself to have forgiven Katerina.
Wow. It's a pragmatic, almost transactional form of forgiveness tied to action rather than just Katerina's words.
Exactly. It forces Katerina to demonstrate her commitment through deeds. Prove it, basically.
As Katerina leaves, Dmitri points her out to Alexei, who is also there. Katerina acknowledges to Alexei that Grushenka didn't give her a direct yes to forgiveness, but states her firm intention to help Dmitri escape anyway.
Right.
Believing that this act itself will be her forgiveness in Grushenka's eyes. She'll earn it.
And with that, Katerina must leave immediately. There's a sudden, poignant shift in the narrative focus.
Yeah, the adult drama and legal fallout recede, and the story turns to a different kind of tragedy, one involving the youngest characters. Katerina must leave for Ilyusha's funeral.
The source material transitions sharply here, moving from the intense emotional and legal world of the Karamazov brothers to the quiet, devastating sorrow surrounding the death of a child.
Ilyusha, the young boy whom Alexei had encountered earlier in the story, the one who bit his finger.
That's him, who had been ill for a long time, has died. The source notes he was only around 10 or 11 years old, succumbing to an incurable illness. Just heartbreaking.
Alexei arrives at Ilyusha's humble house for the funeral, finding other children gathered there, Ilyusha's schoolmates, including Kolya Krasotkin, the bright, somewhat arrogant boy Alexei had befriended.
The scene inside the house, as described in the source, is absolutely devastating. Ilyusha's father, Captain Snigryov, is present, completely undone by grief.
Oh, the poor captain.
He is described as drunk, inconsolable, crying uncontrollably over the coffin, disoriented by his sorrow.
Ilyusha's mother is also there, described as mentally challenged, sitting separate from the main scene, adding another layer of tragedy to the family's suffering.
And the source includes an incredibly poignant and painful detail about the scene. Ilyusha's small body is in the coffin, his hands resting on his chest, holding flowers.
Oh, God.
The mother, perhaps not fully grasping the finality, asks the captain for one of these flowers from their dead son's hand.
And can he do it?
The captain, lost in his own drunken haze of grief, is unable to respond, unable to process or fulfill her simple, raw request. Alexei and Kolya witness this moment, the father's inability to connect with his grieving wife, even in their shared sorrow. "I don't understand anything, how can I give you one?" is the sentiment the source conveys about the captain's state. Just broken.
So painful to watch. They then prepare to take the coffin for burial.
And even in this moment of shared grief, a conflict arises over the burial location.
Really? What now?
Captain Snigiryov desperately wants to bury Ilyusha near a specific stone outside the churchyard. However, others present object vehemently, explaining that this particular stone marks the spot traditionally reserved for the burial of serious criminals and prisoners.
Oh.
"That stone is where we buried very serious criminals," they tell him, insisting Ilyusha must be buried in the proper hallowed ground of the church graveyard.
The captain resists, perhaps because of the personal significance of the spot, but despite his drunken resistance and difficulty, he is eventually overruled. They proceed to the official graveyard next to the church.
At the gravesite, as they prepare to lower the small coffin into the ground, Captain Siguryov remembers something and frantically asks about the bread.
The bread? What's that about?
The source recounts Ilyusha's dying wish, shared by his father. The boy feared being lonely after death and wanted breadcrumbs left on his grave. Ilyusha believed that if bread was left, birds would come to eat it, and their presence would make him feel less alone, giving him the sense that someone was still with him. "The birds will eat the bread there, and I will feel like someone is with me. I won't be alone, Papa." It's just incredibly touching and sad.
That is heartbreaking. A child's fear of being alone, even after death.
The captain frantically searches for the bread, finds it, and places pieces on the grave as the coffin is lowered, a heartbreaking fulfillment of his son's simple, fearful wish.
Oh, I'm glad he remembered.
And then comes the final, devastating moment at the grave. The captain takes one single flower from Ilyusha's hand in the coffin before it is fully buried.
The flower his wife asked for earlier.
Yes. This act triggers a wave of realization and profound remorse in him. He begins to cry uncontrollably, saying he will take this flower to his wife, acknowledging that he failed her earlier when she asked for one, that he didn't do right by her in that moment back at the house.
Finally connects.
His grief completely overwhelms him. He hugs the coffin, the grave, weeping uncontrollably, losing all semblance of composure. He cried profusely, the source emphasizes, capturing his utter breakdown.
The children present, along with Alexei and Kolya, cry with him, witnesses to this raw, unadulterated sorrow. The source notes what an incredibly sad moment this is, acknowledging the tragedy of losing this young boy whom, despite everyone's efforts, they couldn't save. He was just a 10 or 11-year-old boy. He died. We couldn't save him.
After some time, others try to comfort the captain, but he breaks away from them and runs off into the biting cold. The source specifies it's snowing and below zero temperatures, still clutching the single flower.
He just runs off.
Under the cold.
Yes. And in a deeply compassionate act, Alexei, Kolya, and the other children run after him, calling his name, worried about the broken man running lost in his grief and intoxication in the cold. Captain Snegiryov! Captain Snegiryov! Where are you going? Their calls echoing in the cold air.
Wow, even the kids. That shows something about them and about Alexei's influence, maybe. It highlights the unexpected capacity for empathy and connection in these young characters, following a man who had often been an object of ridicule or pity, now simply a figure of immense raw suffering.
Captain Snegiryov eventually makes his way home, but Alexei gathers the children together again.
They return to the stone. Not the grave itself, but the stone outside the churchyard, the place where the captain had initially wanted to bury Ilyusha.
Ah, that controversial stone. This stone, according to the source material, is laden with multiple layers of significant meaning for these characters and this specific story.
Yes, it's presented as a place holding conflicting memories. It's where Captain Snegiryov and Ilyusha used to walk together every single evening, a place of father-son connection and good memories. It's also the place where Alexei had previously offered the captain money from Katerina, which the proud captain had angrily thrown on the ground and stomped on, a place of humiliation and conflict.
Right, I remember that scene.
And finally, it was where the captain had wanted to bury Ilyusha, drawn by those personal memories, but was told it was for criminals.
A single physical location embodying joy, shame, and the way of lost hope and societal judgment. That's powerful symbolism. And it's here, by this deeply symbolic stone, that Alexei delivers what the source describes as his brilliant, soulful final speech to the children.
This speech is presented as the culmination of the emotional journey Alexei and the children have shared, particularly through Ilyusha's suffering and death. It's a moment of teaching, of spiritual guidance offered not from a pulpit, but from a place marked by complex human experience.
His core message to them is powerful and direct. They must never forget this day, this memory of being together. This day of ours today, we must remember it for our whole lives.
He tells them that life is hard, that it will inevitably bring suffering, difficulty, ups and downs, and moments of deep despair, times when they might even feel like dying.
Yeah, life isn't easy.
But in those absolute darkest moments, he says, this specific memory, the memory of being together, attending Ilyusha's funeral, sharing in the sorrow, comforting his family, standing by him in his final journey, this memory will save them.
How so? How can a memory save you?
Whenever you feel very disheartened in life, maybe I might die, maybe you might be about to die, at that time, this memory from today, this will save you. It's the idea that a single pure memory of love, compassion, and shared humanity can act as a beacon in the darkest times, pulling you back from the brink.
Wow, that's a beautiful thought.
He connects their unity on this day, their shared experience of empathy and sorrow, to the power of love and kindness. The love that brought us together here today, he says, emphasizing that their presence and compassion for Ilyusha and his family was not just an action, but an act of great karma earned.
So their kindness matters. It has weight.
Exactly. They must keep this memory alive among themselves, a bond forged in this shared sad experience, and never forget this day, the source stresses, not even until their dying breath.
The children's reaction to Alexei's speech is described in the source as being completely mesmerized, enchanted, as if by magic.
It wasn't just intellectual understanding. The source notes that the speech came directly from his soul, resonating deeply with the children's own grief and experience. They follow him afterwards, calling his name, drawn by his spiritual authority and the solace he has offered. Alexei. Alexei, they call.
It solidifies Alexei's role as a spiritual anchor and leader, doesn't it? Particularly for this younger generation. Finding a way to articulate meaning and hope even in the face of profound tragedy.
Absolutely. And if we take a step back and look at the brothers more broadly, the source material offers an interpretation that helps frame the narrative journey of Dmitri, Ivan, and Alexei in these final sections.
Okay, how does it break them down?
The source suggests that Dmitri represents the body, constantly driven by passions, subjected to physical desires, trials, and ultimately a physical fate, imprisonment, and exile.
Makes sense. Passionate, physical guy.
Ivan represents the mind, wrestling with intense intellectual and philosophical questions, whose internal conflict and struggle for truth ultimately lead to physical and mental breakdown, the brain fever we see him suffering from.
The tortured intellectual. Got it. And Alexei.
And Alexei represents the soul, whose strength lies in his spiritual connection, his compassion, his empathy, and his ability to connect with and inspire others, particularly highlighted in the scene with the children.
Body, mind, soul. So who wins?
Well, in the context of this part of the story, the source material argues that the body and the mind, Dmitri and Ivan, are shown as failing, needing help and support. Dmitri needs to be physically rescued from prison, and Ivan is incapacitated by his illness, requiring care.
Whereas the soul, embodied by Alexei, is presented as the winner in this narrative stretch. He's the one who remains strong, offers comfort, provides guidance, and inspires hope in others.
Yes, the source explicitly states, in the end, the winner is known to be Alexei. The body and the mind are failing in the story, but the soul triumphs. Alexei is the soul, and the soul wins. This provides a powerful thematic lens through which to view their different trajectories and states at the end of the novel.
That's a neat way to frame it. But here's where the source material offers a truly surprising and, frankly, thought-provoking glimpse into what Dostoevsky intended for the future of this story had he lived to write more.
Yes, the big reveal. The source reveals that Dostoevsky actually planned to write a second part to The Brothers Karamazov.
A sequel. Wow. And the planned title for this continuation? The Great Sinner.
A very Dostoevskian title. And who was this planned second part meant to focus on? The spiritual hero we've just seen triumph? Alexei.
Wait, Alexei was going to be the Great Sinner. That doesn't fit the soul wins idea at all.
Exactly. This is the truly shocking revelation. The source material states that Alexei, the pure soul, the spiritual leader of the children, was intended to become the great sinner of the planned sequel.
How? What was he supposed to do?
The source goes further, detailing a potential plot point. Alexei was to become involved in a conspiracy that would lead to the murder of the Tsar of Russia. Alexei would go on to murder the Tsar of Russia. A plan would be made, a conspiracy formed, in which the murder would happen.
He becomes a revolutionary assassin. Alexei.
Well, the source doesn't specify if Alexei would commit the act himself, but being part of a conspiracy to assassinate the head of state is a radical departure from his character as we see him in the finished novel.
That's an understatement. This was envisioned as a complete dramatic transformation, a fall from his spiritual heights, taking the apparent hero of the story and turning him into an anti-hero, a villain in the eyes of the state and perhaps many readers.
It completely flips our understanding of Alexei's trajectory and suggests a much darker, more complex path for the character Dostoevsky left us with. Unfortunately, Dostoevsky died before he could write The Great Sinner, leaving The Brothers Karamazov as a complete work, but with this tantalizing hint of a potential future that challenges everything we might conclude about Alexei's character from the finished novel.
It certainly adds a layer of complexity to our understanding of Dostoevsky's view of human nature, the potential for radical change, for unexpected falls, even in seemingly most virtuous individuals. So what does all of this leave us with? We've navigated the intense legal and emotional battles of the trial, witnessed the complex web of relationships and escape plans, felt the raw, heartbreaking tragedy of a child's death, and the unexpected solace found in connection and memory.
Right.
And peered into a potential future that would have transformed one of the novel's key figures. It's a lot.
It highlights the immense depth and complexity of Dostoevsky's work, how it refuses simple answers, exploring profound questions about justice, love, family, faith, and the human condition in all its messy, contradictory glory. The source material gives us a roadmap through this intensity, revealing the layers beneath the surface.
How do these deep dives into the final sections resonate with you listening? Does the contrast between the lawyer's approaches feel familiar from real life? What do you make of Katerina's complicated motivations or the raw grief and unexpected grace found at Ilyusha's funeral?
And what stands out most from this powerful conclusion? The fates of the brothers as body, mind, and soul. Or perhaps that final astonishing revelation from the source about Dostoevsky's plans for Alexei.
And let's end with that final provocative thought, something to sit with after this deep dive. Dostoevsky intended to take Alexei, the spiritual hero, and transform him into the great sinner involved in the Tsar's murder. What does this radical, unrealized plan suggest about Dostoevsky's view of human potential? What does it mean that even the seemingly purest soul could harbor the capacity for such a dramatic fall?
It raises challenging questions, doesn't it, about the true nature of good and evil, the influence of circumstance, ideology perhaps, and the unpredictable paths our lives and our souls might take. It suggests that maybe no one, not even a character as seemingly saintly as Alexei, is immune to the complexities and potential darkness of the human experience.
Definitely something to mull over. Thanks for joining us in this deep dive into the conclusion of The Brothers Karamazov.